Welcome back to the Innovative Agency, everybody. It's Sharon Toerek. Great to be back with you again today. And I'm very intrigued by today's conversation with our guest. And I'm intrigued because I've always liked having conversations with people who have perspective on how your industry is changing. And we are in a window of time where it's changing multiple ways at the same time, probably more than it has than at any time since I've had a business that serves marketing agencies. And so, of course, I've got to be talking about AI and what its implications are for your businesses. But specifically, I want to have a conversation with today's guest, who I'll introduce in 1 second, about those of you who's got practice areas that touch on SEO. Because in the conversations that I've had with lots of you, I know that the game is so rapidly changing, even more quickly than in other aspects of agency life. And so, Carl Holden, I want to thank you, first of all, for being here today. I'm really looking forward to getting your thoughts and your expertise on this. And I'm going to set the stage for everybody, first of all, by saying that you come to this kind of with a dual set of credentials. You are an agency owner, but you've also launched a second ride-along business with that is focused on AI and how it affects SEO. And so I think your unique perspective is going to be super interesting and helpful to people. So thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
You.
I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. I'm excited too.
All right. So in your agency life, you had a focus on all things SEO. I'm sure other digital marketing things as well, and I'm guessing, but I want you to tell the story. I'm guessing at some point you started to see the game shifting because of how AI was starting to impact your business, your clients' businesses, et cetera. So what was the impetus basically for starting the the RankBot business, which is all about helping AI and how it transitions SEO?
Sure. So when we started the business in 2012, that was the peak of Facebook's popularity, the Ice Bucket Challenge. We all remember those days. But even back then, I knew that search was going to be what had the highest ROI for businesses. And within our area, we really focused on that. We're known for, within North Alabama to Nashville down to the coast, as a company that does really well in helping people rank higher. And there are a lot of components based on that of what's on your website and then the signals outside of your website.
Mhm.
The nice thing about that before AI was you had to put a bunch of human effort into getting your website to what Google wants. A lot of manually reviewing and understanding that took expertise, and then a lot of human effort to get the signals out on the internet. When ChatGPT came around, it didn't just transform marketing, it's going to transform every industry. Is the computers, in a sense, were able to talk back. We're able to create content at a speed that humans just couldn't. And while the content is maybe not as unique, the kinds of things that Google checks in the boxes of its algorithm are activities that a computer can be taught how to do now. And when I saw ChatGPT come out to the public in 2022, I thought I'm going to learn everything I need to know about this. So I took 200 hours from Duke University, Microsoft, LinkedIn, Google, several other university credits. I have like a small degree in it, about 250 hours actually, in understanding the mathematics of it, its capabilities, its limitations, its application to business, etc. And then leverage that to our advantage. And I believe we're one of the few in our area that truly use it the way it could be. So right now, it's a superpower. It makes you as an SEO agency farther ahead than people who aren't using it. But, the rising tide raises all ships kind of thing.
Right.
Everybody's going to eventually have it working to their advantage. So the opportunity I saw is there is a lot of work of getting other sites to link to you. And what RankBot was built to do was to facilitate the outreach, writing, and publishing of content on other sites that create the signals that Google sees. Oh, you're being featured over here with this keyword. We're going to put that in our algorithm to make you rank a little bit higher for that. And so it was repetitive work within our industry, and AI is really good at repetitive work that follows a certain set of rules that has a minimum viable amount that needs to be done. And that's what we've built with RankBot, is what many will call external SEO.
Mhm. That is a really proactive approach back a few years ago to a coming tide that I think a lot of us wish we had taken, right? I mean, to double down and commit to learning about a force that's going to be impacting your business and your clients' businesses. It's certainly not something you can necessarily do for economic changes, right? You can't study your way out of a change in the economy. You can't study your way out of a change in culture or a political environment, perhaps. But um, that's kind of commendable that while you're running an agency, you're also doubling down on what you need to know about completely rebuilding the business, right? Because I'm guessing that in addition to starting RankBot, which was a solution that you perceived to a challenge that digital marketers were going to have in SEO, um, you also had to retool the agency too, right? To kind of adapt as quickly as possible to how AI was going to change your business. And so, what I'm wondering is what are some of those pieces of low-hanging fruit that you would share with agency owners right now who have SEO practices well established and who need to be ready for the impact that AI will have on their customers' findability online, search, all of it. What are some of the things that you think your peers should be really thinking about doubling down on quickly right now?
For sure. Well, and to speak back to kind of the entry statement you had said, I thought, some jerk's going to come around and have an AI to do all that. Why not be that jerk? And it's like the bad
That's one
guy.
philosophy, right?
Yeah, the bad guy with the robot army, he defeats everybody else and the robots turn on him last. Like, it's, I'm building the robot army
All
that
right, got it.
someone else is going to build. And I think that's the thing that agencies really need to pick up on, is the stuff we got to get paid for because no one could figure out how to do it. That barrier to entry is much lower. Now, you can't just talk to ChatGPT and make something like RankBot. It has proprietary knowledge. It has a network of sites that I've built up. So my moat is 12 years of experience and specific connections that I have built up versus the opportunity for agencies now just to learn is really important. Like I do a lot of semi-coding. It's called vibe coding. I'm going to admit that I do it. I'm not a programmer, but if I want to prototype something out, you can do it in softwares like Cursor or Lovable and build something where, I need a better client reporting panel. So I built one myself because I hate everybody else's.
Mhm.
I think the opportunity for agencies to really diversify their capabilities is there. And I benefited too from the fact that I had two technical co-founders within the RankBot company where they could really get it to market as opposed to just a vibe coded prototype. This is, a fully built SaaS software. But that's not to say that AI didn't help our programmers get it to market faster than 5 years ago building something like this. 5 years ago, what we built wouldn't even be possible without generative AI. So what I
Mhm.
really encourage agencies to do is that if you aren't actively adding software and capabilities to your agency, you are actively falling behind. And if you think it's going to stay the way that it is and that this is a fad, you're not paying attention to Yahoo Finance and Forbes, the amount of money being dumped into these companies. And I believe right now, small and medium-sized businesses are the main benefactors. Take the technology that they're losing money on right now and work it to your advantage.
Mhm.
Now, in the final part of your question, where it said, how is this kind of changing SEO? If you pay attention to what Google is saying, it is claiming that SEO hasn't really technically changed. The search results themselves may transition into more paragraph form than just lists. But if you look at what even AI lists, it's coming from the first page of search results.
Mhm.
SEO, if anything, has become more valuable because humans barely went to page two. It's unlikely that in the long run, AI will either. It recognizes that's what people look at. ChatGPT uses Bing and Google. Obviously, Google uses its own system. So you still have to rank. There's no, and I hate the term people keep using, GEO or AEO, all
AEO,
these
yeah.
other things. Uh, all the vowels AEIOU and sometimes Y, all that stuff. Ranking in these systems is still a machine learning algorithm. AI doesn't have the bandwidth or money to index the entire internet uh, with generative AI. That's too expensive. It costs too much. Much of the results you're still seeing in these systems are driven by much more efficient machine learning algorithms that pull the results. And really, ChatGPT or the Google's AI is just a layer that makes those a little more consumable.
Do you have any coaching that you would provide to owners, founders of other digital marketing agencies, SEO specialist agencies, about how you mentioned before adding these technical tools, adding the technologies? How do you know where to start? I guess is my question. How do you know whether to look at generative AI first or AI that's going to impact your workflow? How do you make a decision? Any words of wisdom there to your peers about that?
Sure. So if you have an activity that you do regularly that follows a certain set of rules, there's an opportunity for you. I think it's simple stuff. Many agencies will know, do you pay anybody to remove backgrounds from images anymore? No. You drop the image in Canva, use the AI tool to cut out the background, and you'll never pay a graphic designer to do that again. Does
Mhm.
that suck for graphic designers? Sure. It took half an hour sometimes on a complicated image, and now 9 times out of 10, you can get it done simply. And so those small little things are the easiest wins. But again, looking at over your workflow or your SOPs, and there's something that you do repeatedly that if they follow a specific set of rules, and SEO can follow a lot of this, if it follows a certain set of rules, there's likelihood that AI can at least augment the effort. As far
Mhm.
as coaching and stuff within at least RankBot, when we do demos and stuff, we show how pretty much it hands off the entire external side. And it's really just about you deciding what parts of your site you're wanting to rank and to create those signals for. And rather than worrying all the time about who is going to do every single thing, it becomes more about who is managing the processes of doing a certain thing, some of which may not be human.
Mhm. And from your point of view, how does all of this change the conversations that agencies need to be having with their clients right now? Because in my view, and based on what I see, as an agency advocate, as a representative of agencies, um, the agencies are in a unique and I think not permanent position of being able to be teachers, mentors, leaders in this technology and how it can impact marketing. They are way ahead in most cases of where their client organizations are. So how what are the new things that they need to be considering or communicating to their clients about all these changes and how it should change expectations maybe about the results of findability or SEO efforts.
Sure. So I think the day and age, and I'm not trying to offend any listeners or anything, but of
Thank
people
you.
who don't know, have any technical marketing skill will likely not be agencies that survive this.
Mhm.
If they are brokers and they are not aligning themselves with capable technology savvy individuals or other agencies that can make up for that lack of expertise, they will lose out because they will be asked questions soon they cannot answer. And unfortunately, other agencies around me lose out because of that. I don't snipe any work. I have clients who say they avoid conversations about SEO. They didn't know how to access my Google Analytics and all of these like simple things to me that our agency does every single day. The day and age of people just saying, wow, you really know how to use a computer, people are going to expect more technical savviness from their agencies. And if they're not positioning themselves as experts, they are going to lose. AI will not take their job. Someone who uses AI will take their job.
Right. Right. But assuming that to be a given and assuming that the client chooses to work with that agency because they've owned that, right? They've owned that reality. How does it shift or change the way that the agencies look at communicating to clients about the problems they're trying to solve or the opportunities they're trying to take advantage of right now?
Oh, so obviously, right now, and I have said to my clients too, the total volume of search traffic may decrease over the next couple years.
Got it.
SEO has definitely the generative part of it, that answer engine part has stolen traffic from sites.
Mhm.
The conversation of whether or not that's cool or legal, we all made the dumb mistake of allowing Google to control all of our lives.
Mm,
Past that. We accept that Google's not going anywhere. And if it isn't Google, it's going to be Chat GPT.
mhm,
So I think managing expectations and helping them understand that maybe the stuff they used to get traffic for, like what is blank, may not be that free traffic they get in the future. And how do we pivot into those sections of SEO that people do still expect a website to go and look at? And
mm,
that's where I think a lot of national SEO is going to suffer, but a lot of the local SEO of finding a lawyer or finding a barbershop or networking meetings or things that all happen on a local level, I think they will be less impacted by this because Google still knows that it's best to just let the whole transfer of information go between those sites. Though Google Local Services is another way of them trying to kind of position themselves as a way to connect people to businesses. I think the opportunity is be transparent, show them you have a plan, be honest about it affecting the numbers, and people really respect that. They know our situation is changing. The worst thing you can do is act like nothing's going to change and everything's going to be exactly the same as it was.
right. Well, I love that. And it's also not only that a credibility builder, but it sort of clears everybody's heads so you can focus on the opportunities instead of, right, the doom and gloom or the worry about things not being the same as they were a few years ago. So, speaking of that, what are some of the exciting opportunities that you're seeing that you believe are on the horizon over the next 18 to 24 months with the way AI is shifting findability and search for brands?
Well, I think that agencies are positioned to be authorities on this subject. It has not changed that the general business owner doesn't want to do it. it has not changed that the marketing director who went to school, who only was required to build one website and had maybe one SEO class if they had one at all, still shows that the high technical need of these types of software still lays in the hands of people who do it every single day for multiple organizations. So
Mhm.
there are a lot of people that say that AI is going to kill agencies. I don't think that's the case at all. I think if anything, there will be agencies that lose out on the opportunity. Like I said, more of the broker TV relationship kind of
Right.
previous, if all they're doing is selling the traditional stuff, I think that's on its way out. If they don't align themselves with someone who can also match the digital. I have a great relationship with one that still does a lot of the traditional advertising, and we're able to augment the digital with the digital side. Now, as far as what's going to happen in the next 18 to 24 months, I don't know that anybody knows. The most crazy thing I recently saw was ChatGPT, OpenAI have this thing where you can actually interact with the video live and actually move the person around inside of the video. So there is this opportunity within world models in which AI not only generates video, but can generate interactive situations.
Mhm.
I'm also a big believer in the fact that Apple, Meta, and Google are barreling towards the fact that you will not be putting your computing device in your pocket. It will likely sit on your face if you choose to do so, and that there's an entire world of marketing potentially available in this sort of minority report, things floating in your vision kind of reality. I
Mm,
think there's very much the opportunity that social and the internet will start to exist within physical space.
mm, interesting. So, wow, I,
If you haven't seen it, look
yeah.
at Meta's Orion project on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm only a tiny bit familiar, and so I know what you're talking about. But I'm thinking, I guess I paused because I'm thinking about the implications, like you point out, and the opportunities for actually, wearing the exposure to marketing versus it being on a device you can physically, you know, remove from yourself or your or your proximity. So that is fascinating and frightening, and also a pile of opportunities, like you said, pop up when you think about it. Um, I wanted to get your point of view on talent at agencies right now and what leaders in agencies need to be doing to make sure that the talent who works with them is getting the skill shift that they need to be productive, to be transformed as they might need to be to compete in the agency space as it changes, right? As a result of AI. So, what do you think leaders need to be doing to bring their employees along, to mentor their talent, to make sure that the skills are accelerating or evolving as they need to?
Well, and you'll like this as being in the profession that you are. I think first agencies need to protect themselves from investing in those people and make sure that those who are on the team stay on the team within the legal right of that agency.
Mhm.
Because some of the big issue here is with this barrier to entry, it's very easy for someone to spend a year or two and think that they can go do it themselves. So I think first of all, agencies need to talk to a legal professional, not generating ChatGPT documents and other kinds of things to sign. You should talk to, yeah, okay, you get it. The
I
same
appreciate that
thing.
you said that, and I didn't pay you to say it,
No,
but
you
not
didn't.
hating it.
But I have taken from personal experience that those are things that you need to protect yourself against before you go and invest that. But once
Mhm.
you start to invest that, I think you need to create that culture of innovation where, hey, everybody, there are a bunch of tools. Let's spend 2 or 3 hours a week talking about stuff we've seen out on, on the horizon. Play around with some stuff. I will pay you to play around with some software. I think that sounds counterintuitive, to certain agency owners where they're like lining up butts in the seat and saying, put in your 40 hours of client work. I
Mhm.
think you miss out on the opportunity to allow them a little space to work play in that what if I didn't have to do all of this over and over every single time? If I could get some of this automated, what are the harder things that we do at our agency that I could focus more on? And
Mhm.
I think that's the biggest opportunity. Unlike many other larger organizations, agencies can be much more agile on what they can introduce and start featuring to clients. And also just more open to doing what needs to be done in order to get wins for the clients.
Mhm.
My agency specifically has looked into creating signals in the Google map listings in order to make Google like a map listing more.
Mm.
And those are important things that have helped us grow because we could offer something we kept getting asked for. What AI and other services are there out there, and how can you match the two of those to create a solution for your clients? I think if agency owners are not exploring this every single month with their agency, they're really just sitting on their laurels, taking uh, client dues and hoping that nobody else comes around with a better and shinier object. And then that's just there's a lot of competition out there. You're gonna lose clients to people who are more forward thinking. On the other side, though, I think it's more important than ever to be meeting with your clients, having your uh, employees meet with the clients. Better client retention is often had by just being more human. I think a lot of people do have an AI fatigue. And so there's stuff you should not hand off to the AI. Like if you're sending client reports and it's obviously generated by AI, your client could very much wonder if they're paying humans at all. And it devalues your service by taking away those parts that should still be run by humans.
Mhm. Right. That's well said. And you kind of took a turn to where I wanted to go next, which was about conversations. You know, we talked about talent a second ago, but the agency client relationship and communications. One thing I wanted to ask you about was more on the sales or business development side of the agency business. Are you experiencing clients being more forward and actually asking the agency to account for how they use AI or to be very clear about the ways they're using AI in the onboarding experience or the sales process? And what do agencies need to know to have that conversation so that they're not undercutting themselves, but they're also not scaring the prospect or the piece of business away, right?
I've had several clients ask about like how can we leverage AI to our advantage. Obviously, if you have that kind of queued up in your head on what you're currently doing, that's really good. Again, what happens when your client asks you that and you're like, I don't know, we're working on it. Like that's not going to look good for you.
Right, fair
Um,
enough.
and it's going to make them wonder if you are truly trying to innovate because the customer sees things are changing. And if they don't see you talking about how things are changing or being a part of that conversation, they can start to hesitate and wonder if they've got the best company working for them. I do a lot of work within my community, speeches, etc., to show people I'm actively involved in this. I'm on our mayor's AI council. I go to regularly to show that like we're trying to stay in front of this. As far as actual sales and marketing, there's certain tools and things where we'll come to the client and say, look, there's this new system that we're starting to use with clients, like the solution I have for maps. I think this would be really beneficial to you. It uses AI to your advantage.
Hmm.
Um, and then grandfathering in current clients with stuff you already have, maybe not knocking them over the head. What I've seen is if you bring in stuff, you've got a system for it, they're already a customer, they're the easiest sell that you already have. They don't have to pay full retail off the street. But oftentimes agencies miss out on just growing what they can do for their clients because they're not looking to add additional tools or software. And that's not growing your business. That's just hoping that nothing changes. And it's pretty obvious my opinion on that.
Yeah, no, no, I think that's well said, and that is an awesome mic drop moment too for this conversation because that's the crux of it. You can't bury your head in the sand, nor can you lead, in my view, from a position of fear about all this. You have to balance the opportunities with the risk, right? And tell your clients how you view that and help them look at it that way too, because it's upon us, right? This technology is here, it's changing all of our businesses, and we've got to know how to harness that, right? For to our highest and best advantage. So this has been really engage. I learned a lot. Let's put it that way, just in the few minutes we spent together. And so I'm sure everybody listening has some great takeaways as well. So, Carl, how can people find out more about what RankBot's doing and get in touch with you or with the company if they've got further questions?
Sure. So I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. If you're don't obviously look like you're selling me something with some kind of SaaS software, I'll even accept those people. But other agency owners I connect with every single day. I'm very transparent about what we do and have helped many others in other areas. So I'm happy to have those conversations because, of course, I've got solutions that can help people across the US, like RankBot, that can take some of that day-to-day repetitive work off of people's shoulders. And so you can find me easily if you just look up Carl Holden on LinkedIn. You'll see kind of a bald-headed, nerdy dude on there. That's easy to find. And then as far as RankBot, it's rankbot.ai, which is really easy. Or you can just Google RankBot. It's the first one on the internet, as it should be. So
Right.
that's how you can find me.
Awesome. Well, Carl Holden, thank you so much for joining me today on Innovative Agency. It has been a terrific conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your perspective, and I think everyone got a lot out of this to apply to their own agency. So appreciate you so much. And I appreciate the rest of you for joining us today. Thanks so much for being here, and we will see you on the next episode. And until then, everybody be well.